Yes, so my name's Christian. I've been a Java developer since about 1999. Currently work for Shine Technologies, and I spend a lot of my day writing responsive web applications. So what that means is we have a lot of funky services in the back end written in Java, and in the front end it's all Angular and JSP and you know, sort of best practice for the client-side web applications. But I've noticed that to get those pages and to get those services exposed to that app, we were still using JSPs, or this might just be a bit my assumption, but I assume people are maybe using frameworks that really aren't sort of suited to that. So this is sort of where this came from. So it's sort of a bunch of little different things I've been working on over the years. It sort of came together, and I went, hang on, this is actually something that I could call a project. So a little presentation for it, and what we'll cover. So ruffle scale web applications. So what this might actually do, how Silicone might help or not. I'm going to go through the inner workings of how it's going to work. And there's a demo application that's with it. It's sort of a test case app. I'm going to walk through that and how that works at a code level, and then what's hopefully coming up feature-wise. Ruffle scale web application. So this is the sort of the modern approach. If you would want to build something like a Twitter, no, maybe not such Facebook, something that's reasonably simple, something like Pinterest maybe. That's you sort of see there's not much to it. It's all fairly template based, and it's maybe accepting client calls from smartphones, and then also has to manage. I might be logged in on a bunch of devices, so that kind of thing. So the cloud. So all this means here is that each server is receiving completely stateless stateless requests, no sticky sessions, something like this, because we want to be able to bring down these servers, bring them back up, and handle requests that way. And then they'll, in the back end, that's something like whatever the back end is. Typically, if you're trying to scale something, you use some kind of MapReduce. I've been playing with Amazon SimpleDB with good results. So basically what that means is the apps that I've built with this so far, I know that if I suddenly had demand to scale infinitely sideways, I can do it. And it's more about what I don't do than what you do with these frameworks. So it's going to be stateless and therefore elastic. And I'm calling single page one of two things. A responsive single page app, which is something where even say once a user's authenticated, we'll serve out a page that might be filled out with various details, a template that we've substituted the user's values, and then we let the JavaScript side of the app drive things. We're not really serving many more pages from there, so we don't need some kind of model view controller on the front. It's all in the back end, it's on the front end. And then we'll have service calls coming back just to REST, JSON, XML, or whatever. And then a data-driven single template. So this is something like Twitter or the big image stores where you hit a page and it renders a template for that page context, for that user, for that page. And there's potentially every request could be completely different in context-wise. So the first class concepts trying to put in. So multiple client session tracking. It's not real sessions, of course. They're not, there is no object model that you would normally have in your servlet.get session. There is no servlet.get session. Putting in some request forgery strategies. HTML as a first class concept. So rather than just serve out a JSP, serve out a HTML file, frameworks like Wicket and stuff like that have HTML as a first class concept in that their templating system understands. It basically parses and produces HTML. So I've got an interesting, I hope novel, templating mechanism I'll explain on that. Structured URLs, so it basically does the work of breaking up paths and does some handy things about path management for you. HTTP request methods and responses, so basically handling 404s, as we build, there's not too many features in it right now, but as we build more features in, so it sort of becomes convention over configuration for what responses should be being served. What I'm calling artifacts and actions model. So actions are basically controllers, hooks to your code that do things, and artifacts are sort of the components in a page or in a request. I won't explain that too much, it'll sort of become evident if you see it. And a REST and page binding strategy. This comes back to the HTML rendering. It renders off your backend object model, and then the REST call service exposure has a direct connection to that, rather than being sort of what you'd normally do is implement them in different ways. So this is basic model of, I have a data model for HTML pages. I want to have some kind of templating mechanism. AJAX calls might be requesting XML or JSON, make calls back against this same data model that was used to create the page in the first place. Could be an app. And then pluggable renderers that can render any content type. So it's not just pages, it's not just XML, it's just whatever content type you want to implement. So the templating model is actually based on XSLT. I won't say that too loudly because I'm actually looking at replacing the XSLT, the piece of the XSLT that you see, so that you don't actually have to write in XSLT. But what I think is the powerful bit of what I've done is XSLT, for those who don't know, is basically taking an XML data model, whether that's an actual XML file or a DOM in memory, rendering it against an XML version of your HTML, and it has tags to do loops and value replacements and so forth. And they get merged and generate HTML as an output. Traditionally, how you do that is you would predefine whatever your data model is, pass that into JAX or something, a JAX converter. Internally, they usually use the internal Java DOM API. It's an interface that is used to combine these two to generate the output. What I've done is implemented the DOM API myself, and as each node is traversed on the XML model, it dynamically reflects the data required on the back end. What that actually means is that as the template is asking for what it needs, it's only then poking through and cherry picking the data that it actually needs. And where I see that's powerful is that you could have your data model on the back end can be, backed by some Hibernate persistence, it could be a potentially infinitely large data model on the back, which will be, as I say, cherry picked for what it needs. So it's in effect a way of binding your data to HTML, and that API is also used to do the output for service calls. So in a bit more detail, so that was the rendering part is sort of that there. So the basics of the controller are, we do some as to the cookie tracking, persistent long-term cookies for a scenario where you want to be able to log into a site and walk away and come back. Now that has to be persisted somewhere, so you do have to implement an interface where you store a bunch of values that the API gives you, basically cookie information and the user identifier, to say, okay, when somebody comes back and hits another node, it's got to go somewhere. So there's a test implementation that just has a map in memory. So that'll obviously only work on one node. As I say, I've implemented that against Amazon SimpleDB, which is all nicely scalable, works quite nicely. This drives a set of little interfaces that you implement to decide which artifacts go on your page requests, depending on whether you're logged in or logged out on the scenario. And then actions are your code that does something with those things. Currently I've got that implemented as forms, so we're about to see some old school forms. But the idea is that will also be implemented as onto the Ajax handlers, which is probably more practical and more useful. But obviously both would both be required. And then request parameters get set on your actions. And I'll show you what that means. So I'm going to do a live demo or a dead demo. So this is the demo application. As I say, it is an old school submit a page load, but you'll get the idea of how it works. So now I have to drive side raise. So with this is an example of, this is just some basic templating but this data is based on my back-end global model. So anybody who hits this site will see that. It's not specific to me as a user. I'm going to create a user called blah test create, logs me in. I've got a session there. I can jump to another there. So I'm still logged in. I can I'm going to book a flight. I'm going to type that wrong on purpose because it's going to say new. Yeah, it's just got a generic error handler up here for that. Book a flight, appear on the flights list. Pretty simple stuff. And pop that back out. So this gives you the context of what's actually happening. So essentially it's just a servlet. I wire that in here. There's nothing, from a scalability point of view, there's nothing, it doesn't create any threads, it doesn't do anything too weird to prevent scalability. Some of the code isn't internally written to be highly optimized, but it's not written to do anything stupid either. So it's not necessarily about actual raw performance with scalability, as we all know, with many sites big sites being written in all sorts of languages. It's just about being able to scale that as needed. Get back. So this airline's setup. This is you basically implement the Silicone setup interface, and it will call this method. This is the complete sort of data context of my application. A user service, which was used to create those users and log them in. In the demo, they're just maps in memory. No real security on that. Flights is flight builder that created that list that got rendered, and then my bookings back here. The idea is it's the bookings against the user and the list of flights. So we register the action. So we create a user. That's the action that got implemented. It hooks up to the user service. Login action against user service. Log out. Doesn't really need to connect to anything else. All it needs to know is how to log someone out. Check in for a flight, and book flight. Obviously needs to be able to get the flights and set them on bookings. And had to register an artifact here specifically. Some of the others don't, but it's got an annotation on it that needs to be processed. The process of making that all magical so that it just can do the scan approach. And memory session persists. So this is where basically my cookies are stored in this demo for the memory version, but this is where you'd implement your own, have it into your backend. Global actions. So the purpose of artifacts. So these artifacts are meant to be either basically static, like they are here. I haven't created a new one, or light or flyweight, because every page request they get created. So if there's something heavy that needs to be constructed, you wrap it, or you basically wrap one around around it. But there's obviously there's an advantage if you want one recreated every page for whatever reason. There's your point of creating that state. Stateless actions, so I'm going to need logins and create user. They're available when there is no state, as in not logged in. And then when I am logged in, I can book flights, log out, and view the bookings list. So this was that session record I was telling you about. It's just a bean that has a bunch of values that you need to implement, or you just use the memory one if you're going to be single node. And ignore this code, doesn't really mean much. But the important thing here is the flights, which was on the board. I've annotated as endpoint. And we'll see why that's a bit funky later on. Login bean, so this is used to basically bind the values on the form. Name and password. Login action implements action user generics. It'll automatically work out that login artifacts get sent to this action. I've got my user service that was constructed at start time, and basic, non-security. The important thing here is that once we've decided the user can log in, we set the log out back onto the artifacts. And what that does is that logout has an annotation called session marker, and that tells Silicone we're logged in and basically switches modes. When you log out, same in reverse, remove that, and that tells it to stop tracking cookies. Action for a get request. So by default, they're always post. For security reasons and for neatness and to stop people, sending things the wrong way and then you change them, just all those things. So this is a get method. Doesn't really do anything there. The template. So as I said, XSLT, the style sheets, looking to put other templating technologies on the front which work in the same way. They obviously have to have the same attributes. So there's a path offset thing. We'll get to that soon. The departure board. Okay, so the template isn't supposed to decide when things are visible. I just make sure that everything on the template has all the components, and it doesn't have to be one great big file. I'm envisaging includes so that you can structure, put things out neatly, but it'll build it into one template that is stored in memory, ready to render on a page request. So for flights, headers, and then all the flights, I've just put their values on here, and that just gets rendered against the data. Form binding, so I've got name. I've underlined these because this is the form value that gets set back, the login name, and this is its initial value. So even though there's no session or state, if you keep hitting a page and reloading it, not completing your form, that's basically the refill to refill everything back on the form, until it's successful, or until this is specifically in your actions change values. Against the request forgery. So here I've just got a little auth token. That's what ends up in the output. The other thing it does is that if you just start sending forms to actions that aren't actually in that context that weren't if you're stateless and you send it in but you're in a stateful mode, it won't process it, so it's just a security mechanism. You can't forget to protect the service. As I said, this is all forms. Nobody really uses forms for anything serious other than maybe sort of logins or whatever, but the same methodology will apply to the others. So what that means is on the initial page load, these artifacts were set, flights and check-in, and we log in and create user. That got us to that point because it rendered those, and that was the global. Pointed that out before, session marker, log out. So that then got the slides back to front. Anyway, so we logged in. Oh no, that's right. So after the login, back to there. So I showed you earlier. Benefits of using the built-in DOM processor is this is the HTML output. I've got a nice template I can work with, but I've told the processor to compact everything. I know that there are no missing or broken tags because the processor wouldn't have even rendered it if there was. All pasted in values are properly escaped, reducing cross-site scripting possibilities. As I said, things like just non-existent path handling. And as you can see, this path that doesn't exist, that will help us. Things like the path offset will bring you back to as a relative path rather than a very common scenario we see with HTML is you're just not set up to know where the context is on your page render. So you either go hard to the bottom of the server, or you've got a hard-coded value in the properties file that says what is the context of my app. Just workarounds like that just sort of removes or helps with those scenarios. The endpoint that I put on the flights, what that means is that if I hit services JSON flights, I get that. I'm working on mechanisms where, as I said, paths as a first class concept, /flight number would give me that record number only. And then configurable ways, probably with annotations to say which parameters, so that you can have neat paths. It's a common problem when you see URLs and get parameters where sort of programmers are exposing the internal workings or exposing software engineering to the public. We should only ever see nice URLs. Again, XML, same thing, same data. And where from here? At the moment, every page that is served, regardless if it's the same page from for the anonymous login page, is re-rendered and sent with no content expiry of no expiry date. So I'm looking at ways to have your annotate your artifacts so that it can decide when a page is static if you've properly told it which classes are going to be rendering static content or something other than relying on hard coding some kind of content expiry date yourself. Full REST support. This may be implemented with a third-party library. Probably will actually once I realise how complicated that is. Definitely friendlier templates. Biggest criticism I've had from this from people is XSLT. I was like, yeah, I know, man, but my renderer is cool. Just we can pass the same ideas down to the processor. And any questions?
What's the licensing?
Patchy.
Had you looked at anything else like Spring Data or what else had you looked at?
Not much. This is for, as I said, I've sort of been building this for myself. I hadn't actually built it as a project myself. I was building a little app, and then realised that if I just took a bunch of these packages and took them out separately, it was a thing in itself.
Yeah.
So, if I'd analysed other packages that might not have been written in the first place. I can reinvent wheels. Wheels rounder than anybody else's.
Is this available to download from
Oh yes,
somewhere, or
yes.
have a
So
play with yourself?
Catchpole.net has a link to it's actually on Google Code, but I'll probably put it on GitHub. I guess cool place for it to be. Yeah. So that demo, you check it out. Maven build, deploy the at war, and it's done.
Questions?
That example didn't have any JavaScript in it?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Other than it was like Bootstrap or whatever.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. I think when I get the more of the REST services going, obviously that was a great candidate to actually show that
Yeah.
full cycle working.
So it's kind of like the JSP, JSF kind of thing? Something where it renders it and then just throws it at the browser. Kind of the same thing. I'm trying to understand the templating part.
So you wouldn't return, I suppose, just snippets. You're returning the whole thing each time as a single page. So sometimes in JSPs you might put it in a template and then have all the just return that in a single response. But the whole idea then you're returning the whole thing. It's like Gmail. You don't have half a Gmail.
Yeah.
You've always got the whole.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not really supposed to about rendering. No, it's not about rendering page snippets at all. I guess there's no reason why that couldn't be added, but that's sort of.
I've just never seen a single page app without JavaScript, so it's kind of.
I'm just saying, if you can imagine, you could, you'd be in a very good position to build a JavaScript app on top of that.
Yeah.
It's all about getting that initial page layout. That's an awesome page.
Yeah.
Backed, data's backed well, all the cookie handling. So that's where the feature sets, I think, will be going, of not trying to be everything, but just trying to be that layer that would have been done by maybe, the way I've just always seen it was just some JSPs with some hacky things that